bunch of disgraces.
Wow. You never cease to impress me.
With my mad rapping skills.
Is that what that was? Oh, I thought, never mind.
Oh.
I guess not.
Welcome to the No Budget Filmmaking Podcast, presented by Cinema Summit, a podcast about the art of making films, no matter how small the budget. And now, here are your hosts, Alex Darke and Trevor L. Nelson.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. This is episode 16 of the No Budget Filmmaking Podcast. I'm Alex Darke.
And I am Trevor L. Nelson, and we have been teasing it forever. I know you guys have been excited, all three listeners of this podcast.
Yes.
Zef is in the house.
Zef
We've been
Cota.
talking about it. Zef Cota, director, writer of The Trouble Once Upon a Time in the Bronx. He's in-house with us, in the heat, suffering with us.
Yeah.
That's right.
Welcome, man.
Yeah,
It's great to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
No problem, no problem. And to start it off, guess what? We're all drinking Kona beer.
Yeah, again.
Again.
For the last...
This is about 15
The sixth time?
podcasts.
I like
It's going to go on for another 20 podcasts because of how much Kona Brewing Company beer we have.
Yes. Don't worry, we'll get back to you. Tito's.
Oh, Tito's will come back.
We'll
Don't
come
worry.
back.
That doesn't spoil. Beer maybe spoils. I don't know.
We don't know.
I it never sits around long enough for me to see if it spoils. So instead of what's new with us, because nothing's new with us, Zef, what brings you out to LA? What's new with you?
So, I recently completed my film. It's called The Trouble. The full title is The Trouble Once Upon a Time in the Bronx. It's actually going to be we're having our premiere screening at the Action on Film Festival next month
Nice.
out in Las Vegas.
Nice.
Great.
Yeah, so...
Oh, God, that's going to be... Oh, man, are you going to even make it to your film
Oh,
screening?
yeah, I will. Yeah, for sure.
They'll wheel you in like in a drunken stupor and just be like, hey, here you go.
Yeah,
You're like,
it'll
I
be a good
just
time.
won $200.
It's funny because our producer happens to be out there the same exact weekend for a bachelor party.
Oh,
It's like the same
nice.
exact weekend. So
Oh,
timing-
that's just
timing
bad.
works out.
Convenient.
That's so bad.
Bad, but it's good.
Okay, so that you got that going.
So
What
there's
else?
that. So I'm here for some meetings. I have a bunch of friends in LA, and I'm also doing some commercial work and some music video type of work and that sort of thing.
Nice.
As well as developing my next feature,
Nice.
which it's still in the very, very early stages. But
Excellent.
I mean, you sound like you belong in LA already. I got some meetings. I got some music videos. I'm going to go stroll
In
the
development.
beach. Yeah, in development. I
Yeah,
got a
right.
script in development.
I have
Showed to
numerous
some
projects
people.
in various stages of development.
So
Perfect.
we'll see what we got. But all right,
Perfect.
well, sweet. So let's just jump into it because we have a lot of questions for you.
Sure.
First off, what's your social security number and home address?
Also, you don't have to say it on the podcast, but what's your PIN number? Just write it down.
PIN number. Just blink for every number. 855.
Is that what these armed men
Yeah,
are
we just
outside
yeah.
the house?
We basically just do a podcast so we can steal people's identities. That's the
So
only
far,
purpose
we've
of
only
that.
stolen our own identities. Okay, first question, or actually, just give us a little bit of your background, how you got into film, and what got you interested in this crazy industry.
So that's a good question. I was always into movies. I loved movies from being a kid, going to the movies. I was the type of kid when my dad gave me a Hi-8 camera. He gave me like a Sony camcorder, and I used to love filming with it. I figured out how to wire two VCRs together to kind of
Nice.
yeah.
Yep,
dub
I did that
music
thing.
in.
Yep.
Make
Oh,
title
yeah.
every time there was a project for, let's say, school.
Sounds
of
eerily
doing a
familiar.
Instead of doing the presentation, I always opted for the video, and I really spent more time on making the titles for the video than the actual content.
Are you my twin?
Yeah.
Are we long lost brothers? Because this sounds eerily familiar.
Yes.
But okay, keep going. Keep going.
And so then, I was always just really into it. And when I was in high school, I saw an ad or a flyer rather posted all across my high school and it said, "We're looking for an apprentice for a video editor." And then me and my friend Jeff, basically, we went around the school and we took down every single flyer. There were like dozens of
Nice.
flyers across the
Ooh.
school. We took down every single flyer.
Sabotage. I like it.
But I called that number, and it was a guy named Anthony that had a small production studio in Mount Vernon, New York, which is like 25 minutes outside of the city. And I lived near there at the time. And went in for the interview. I said, I'd really like to be, work for you as the apprentice editor. And they were doing, weddings and bar mitzvahs and things like that. And at that time, it was like linear decks.
Oh.
It was old school. Like we're talking like 1998, 1999.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so he was like, yeah, you got the job, you know? And I was like, great. I was excited. He's like, it's funny. Nobody else called me.
I was going to ask. Were you the
great.
only one who came in?
I was the
going
only
to
one that
ask.
came
Did it
in.
work? All right.
And so then I loved it.
Nice.
You know, I was editing weddings and bar mitzvahs, but I just really got into it. And so at the time, I was also taking some classes at the School of Visual Arts on the weekends with my friend Mike Reich, who was into it. And he's actually a filmmaker based out here nowadays. But he was one of my first friends that was really kind of serious about it. And so then we took this 8mm directing course on Saturdays. And at first, I'll be honest with you guys, finding out how much work filmmaking entails was kind of daunting to the 16-year-old me. When I was like a junior in high school, I was like, whoa, like this is, I love movies, but this is like intense.
Yeah.
33-year-old me still thinks it's daunting sometimes. So, don't worry.
I didn't get that realization until I was in college studying film. I was like, oh no, this is
You're
a lot
already
of
in
work.
too deep.
You're
already at the point of no return.
Where are my assistants to bring me lunch?
So there was that, and then also about the fact that I'm the son of immigrants. You know, my parents came from Albania, and being Albanian, you know, they never said don't become a filmmaker or anything like that. It just felt like a pipe dream. It just seemed like something that wasn't for us. It seemed like, oh well, you have to be born into that, or you have to already be wealthy, or you know, have those connections. And so I didn't pursue it in college. I actually went to school for business, and so then I graduated college. I started my own business. I was doing welding ironwork at the time, and something totally different than cinema.
Yeah.
And I was doing okay with it, you know, but then I realized, hey, you know what? Life is too short to just do something just for money. You know, I really thought about my life, and I was like, I kind of considered, what would I do if money wasn't a factor? I'm like, well, it's a no-brainer. I would be involved with filmmaking for sure. And then I sort of plunged back into that. And
awesome.
I was kind of thinking at the time, hey, should I go to film school, you know, because I'm sort of starting from scratch, or should I use that money and kind of bankroll my first short films? And I kind of opted to make my own short films and just kind of self-finance those. And I partnered up with a guy named George Rudai, who went to film school, and my friend Joel Martinez, who went to film school. And they were kind of my early production partners. So in the early days, they used to chew me out. They were like, oh, Zef, this is that. You know, but then I got to a point where they're like, Zef, you didn't need to go to film school.
Nice.
You know?
Nice.
Because I kind of made up for it by just every book I could pick up, every movie with the director's audio commentary, DVD, everything that I could consume. I was just completely into it. I was completely immersed myself into cinema and just learning about filmmaking. So I was extremely proactive. And then just from making the shorts, at first it was sort of an unmitigated disaster. But then, you know, I kind of learned it was sort of trial by fire. And I just kept trying to improve.
I think what that sounds
similar to this film school experience.
Yeah, exactly.
We were kind of in the same boat where we were at school studying film, but at the same time it was kind of in our hands, and we had to go out and do our own projects and like get involved in things and try to like, you know, weasel our way into different projects so we could get the hands-on experience. Because really, Trevor and I, we majored in the movie watching type of...
Movie watching, the easy one. We watch movies and say how they made us feel.
Yep.
But no, I mean, it's funny because a lot of people who say, you know, should I go to film school or not, the biggest thing is that we always tell people is that, you know what, it doesn't hurt to go to film school, but at the same time, you learn so much when you're actually making the movies or making short films that you learn a lot more because it's hands-on. And it's easy to, you know, sit in a classroom and somebody tell you like, well, this is how you change, you know, these are f-stops and this is how you, you know, the composition of a framing of a scene. It's like, okay, that's cool. But until you get on set, you really don't know anything. Like no matter what they say, you don't know anything.
There's something about a big burly grip yelling at you because you're setting up a C-stand wrong that really sticks in your head as opposed to just reading it in a book, you know?
I'm going to remember. I'm going to call you the big burly grip from now on, Alex. You are my big burly grip.
Oh, sweet.
All right, so let's get into more specifics. Let's get into your debut feature, The Trouble.
Absolutely.
So give us an idea of what the movie is about and more importantly, how you came up with the idea.
All right. So I was actually in around 2014. I was at the Cannes Film Festival attending a producer's workshop, out there in France, and I was really trying to get a bigger budget film developed that I thought was going to be my first feature film. I wrote a script. It was sort of an independent comedy, sort of a dramedy, drama/comedy that, I thought was sort of interesting, and I co-wrote it with Mark Marini, who is my cousin, but we've co-written a lot of projects together.
Nice.
Including The Trouble. But I found that as a first-time filmmaker, getting a project developed around the $1 million range was it's just too big of an ask, and it seemed too difficult. And then one day when I came back, George Rudai, who basically was my producing partner, he said, hey, the cost of making features has plummeted down compared to what it used to be. Why don't we just make a feature? Why don't we just pool our money together and just make a feature film, and then we could show people what we could do. I'm like, all right, let's give it a shot. But for me, it's important. Obviously, the idea is important. So, I just didn't want to just plunge into something. So I was just kind of keeping myself open to what is the type of idea that could lend itself to a low budget feature.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was actually watching a lot of mumblecore films, and obviously, I don't know if you guys are familiar with any of those kind of films, like the guys like Joe Swanberg made, and they were kind of cropping up in 2005.
Mark Duplass.
Mark Duplass. Yeah, the Duplass brothers.
Yeah.
They were sort of the pioneers of mumblecore.
Yep.
And what I liked about mumblecore was this kind of punk rock attitude about making a movie.
Yeah.
They just were like, all right, we're going to get some actors, we're going to get a location, we're just going to freaking do it. We're not going to wait for a studio to greenlight us. We're going to do it on a small budget. And I'm like, yeah, that's amazing. But what I didn't really like about mumblecore is it seemed like they didn't pay any attention to any cinematic structure. It wasn't cinematic enough for my own taste and what I'm trying to, I guess.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Bring to the table. So I'm like, is there some way we could do both? Is there some way we could do kind of like a mumblecore-ish kind of thing? At first, we thought the film would maybe be improvised because I came up with this idea. I'm like, hey, at first it was a very broad concept. Like one day, just the idea came to me: geek versus thug. I'm like, that's kind of interesting. Like the juxtaposition from a geek and a thug. Just like I was like, let's make like this mumblecore-ish kind of movie, geek versus thug, like something like that.
Before you go any further, how about you explain to everyone who can't see the film yet what the movie is about?
Absolutely. So the movie is centered. We're calling it sort of an urban western, but it's really about a guy named Billy, who he seems like a geek. He plays a lot of online poker. He doesn't get out too much, and all of a sudden, his favorite websites to play poker, they get shut down.
Okay.
All the websites get shut down. So he starts playing in these in-person games, and then he's totally a fish out of water. It turns out these games get busted, and the thug that runs these games, named Enzo, he blames Billy for the fact that the games got raided, and basically he's trying to extort Billy and his girlfriend Marisol. And then Billy hires this rogue hitman. Is he sort of a hitman? Is he sort of a private investigator of the streets sort of guy? He's very mysterious. His name is Pitt. He hires Pitt to get him out of this situation. But it spirals out of control from there because he sort of deceives Pitt.
Gotcha.
To kind of take on his case.
Yeah, we were some of the lucky few that actually watched the film because he gave us a little early access. So that was a pretty damn good summary of it. Yeah, I mean, so now that they know what the film is about, continue on with where the idea came from. You said you were on geek versus
thug. Geek. I just like that concept of geek versus thug, and I like the idea of just the notion that you really can't judge a book by its cover. Like somebody might see somebody and they might think that they're a geek, and they might kind of judge them a certain way or put them in a certain category as being a geek, but maybe there's a lot more that meets the eye to that geek, and so that was certainly the case with Billy in The Trouble. And I've known John that played Billy for a long time. He's not traditionally an actor, although he's really forayed into acting, and he's more of a comedian. He's doing stand-up comedy and a lot of improv in New York, and since doing the movie, he's done a lot more. But then the idea sort of started coming to me. I'm like, hey, I started then I worked with Mark Marini, and he was like, hey, we should do something that's like a Western. And I'm like, I like that idea. Because I always liked, well, the concept of an urban Western, where it's not, the Wild West, and it's not guys on like horseback. It's like the South Bronx.
Yeah.
It's guys on motorcycles and that sort of thing.
Is that where the idea for him being, I'm not going to, generalize it, but him being like a kind of a card shark, is that where the idea came from, or did you have that idea first? Because you think of Westerns, you think of like the guy, the poker game where guys are slipping, aces from their boots and all that.
Yeah.
And all that. Is that where, because you want to do an urban Western, is that where the poker idea came from?
That's a good point. So I think it kind of organically evolved because since we were doing a low budget / no budget feature, my production studio is based in the South Bronx, right near the 3rd Avenue Bridge, and it's a part of the city where you never ever see on film, but one that just I've naturally always walked by and just really admired certain scenic landscapes from a cinematic perspective, thinking, I would love to shoot something here. I would just love to shoot something here. So just walking around that area inspired the idea for the movie because it's a part of the city that you just don't really see on film. Hardly ever, especially in an independent film. Like, they might film like a scene for Law and Order here and there for like a TV show or, something for Power or something like that. You'll see trucks there, but there's hardly ever any independent films that I see or stories that are really centered in that area. And so to keep costs down, I knew that we had to limit our locations. In fact, that was one of the stipulations for our producer, George. He said, all right, it's like, just you guys write the script, but keep the locations down. Keep them at a bare minimum. And then when he read the first draft, because naturally I just write with a lot of locations.
Of course, of course.
And so then when he read that first draft, George was a little irked. He was like, guys, like, what the hell? Like, I said to keep the locations down. He's like, we have a club scene, we have this, we have that. I'm like, don't worry, George, we'll make it work. He's like, all right.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things I was impressed with your project was how, unlike the mumblecore projects, it had scope. It seemed bigger, but I really liked some of what I think, I don't know, maybe they weren't, but I caught some things that were like kind of low budget, little tricks.
You're wrong.
I know.
You're wrong, Alex. So.
Things like, one of the things I noticed was you never showed the online poker.
Right.
And I was wondering, just a question, was that because you didn't want to like have to make an online poker generic graphic? Because that was a pretty clever trick, if so, because you talked about it. I got like the visual sense of it from their descriptions, but you never actually showed it on screen.
That's a good point, Alex, because that's something we discussed at length, and we actually did make a graphic that was like a very simple graphic, because so there was that for sure. There was the budget, but aside from the budget, if you notice, there's not a lot of cars in the film because I wanted the film to take place not necessarily in the past, but not necessarily in the contemporary present, if that makes any sense. I want it to be its own self-contained world, so I don't want to date itself too much by showing a lot of technology or a lot of vehicles. Yeah. And
definitely.
So there was that as well.
A great point. That's one thing that, to me, dates projects more than anything is like looking at the computer interfaces and seeing, because everything else could be totally fine. Then all of a sudden they flip open a computer, you see a monitor, and you're like, whoa, that looks weird.
Right.
Yeah. Like the original Google logo, you're like, wow. This movie's so
strange.
old.
Yeah. So it might be fine for a year or two, but 10 years from now, it'll be like, whoa.
Yeah, okay. Very good.
Now, it's going back to locations. So I know from doing all of our no-budget projects and working with many people who are trying to do their no-budget projects, the biggest thing is locations because they cost a lot, especially in LA, and I would assume in New York, never shot there. But you had some good locations. I mean, you did some really smart. Yeah, the church was
a great find,
amazing, and your cinematographer lit that thing beautifully. And if he didn't light it at all and just used the natural light,
he
killed it.
He did a great job.
But like you had a liquor store, you did some very smart things at like times when it was like you kind of like focus on the character and not the background. So it was a club, but it wasn't, you couldn't see the club, which is a great way to cheat that you're in a club or stuff like that. But how did you go about getting your locations? Are you just straight, we paid for them, or did you?
A little bit of both. It's a good question because I think for one, I sort of tried to write thinking about which locations that I have access to. My friend Anthony Angrasani owns that liquor store in the Bronx.
Okay.
He owns a wine and liquor store called La Cantina. Shout out to them.
Hey,
Thanks,
Shout out.
La Cantina, we'll shout it out for the next 15 episodes if you send us some free booze. Hey, La Cantina, ole. All right, continue. Sorry.
So, but anyway, I knew that I was like, all right, Ant will let us film over there if there's a scene that could take place over there.
Yeah.
You know? So that sort of thing. There was a place down the street. We tried to use our production studios in a loft building in the South Bronx called the Clock Tower.
Okay.
And so we tried to center everything in or around the Clock Tower, you know, which it didn't exactly turn out that way, but we used that as like the home base of operations because I
Sweet.
knew from experience with the short films that that's just the biggest killer. Moving locations, like,
Oh, yeah.
it's the worst.
Yeah. Okay, I got to ask.
Sure.
Now the movie's locked. You know, police can't come after you. How many shots did you steal without permits? Because, I mean...
A good amount of them.
Yeah, good.
A good
All
amount
right,
of
that's
them.
all I like
Yeah.
to hear. That's all right.
Yeah.
Screw the man.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like the graveyard, the cemetery.
We got permission from it was a cemetery. It's a really old cemetery, actually. So
Okay.
any of the dates are visible if somebody's watching the film. Like the dates are like on the tombstones are from like the 1890s or from like the 1900s. Like, you know,
Sick.
and it was like apparently George Washington with his troops marched through that area.
That's
There's
awesome.
a lot of history there.
That is awesome.
Crazy.
So
Let's go shoot a horror film there.
somebody sort of hooked us up with that, and they did it for free.
Awesome.
You know, we're so grateful to them. But we basically called in every favor that we could. But yeah, that ended up working out with the cemetery.
Did you sneak around with anything else in terms of locations?
Oh yeah, a lot of them.
Or did you cheat anything? Like,
Yeah, most of the stuff that you saw in the street. Do you know the shot actually where they're at the warehouse, but then they go outside for a minute, and then they have the guns? And,
Yeah.
Yep.
Without giving too much of a spoiler away, that shot was totally stolen, and that was kind of hairy because
Nice.
you know, we were like, all
Sure.
right, we don't want the NYPD to see us with fake firearms and then
Yeah,
start
that's
blasting shots at us.
Yeah,
Always-
that's a good
always
one.
hairy.
Yeah.
Always
Yeah.
hairy. And you had mentioned before to us that you used a couple locations for multiple different locations within the film.
Exactly.
How did you go about figuring that out and making it look different?
So it's a good question. We had an outstanding production designer, and her name is Clarissa Garcia Fresco. And it's amazing that she took on our project because we didn't really know her before that. And she was going to AFI at the time, I think as part of a very prestigious program where they only select a couple of people per year. And she had a background in architecture.
Oh, nice.
And we had the first meeting, and it was just a sort of a chaotic day because she came in very late in the game onto pre-production. And at the time, my son was there, so there was like a infant baby and like a thing. My wife was there, like
Make it work.
like, yeah, and just like the studio looked like in shambles. And then this woman who has a very professional background comes in, and she was amazing in terms of her ideas. And I just didn't think she was going to come on board, but she did, and she brought so much to the table. And so I think we were able to utilize different spaces. For instance, Billy and Greg's apartment, that is our studio.
Okay.
So that's our production studio. And
Are
so
those
then
your comic books?
Yes.
Yes, nice.
Those are my collages on the wall.
Oh,
I
okay.
actually made those myself.
Okay, nice,
Yeah,
nice.
so that's my own sort of
Nice.
artwork.
Nice. And so you used your studio as their apartment.
As their apartment.
Okay.
And then we also dressed it up to use it for the poker den scene and
Nice.
whatever else we needed it for.
Wouldn't have been able to tell.
Was it also the angle on the bar of people at the bar? You know, because you had the darkness side where people were dancing and stuff like that.
No, the club was actually a restaurant down the street, which has a back
Gotcha.
room, and we
Oh,
turned
nice.
that into a club.
Nice. So going off of what you were saying about that your production designer was kind of like new, she was coming on the project fresh. How much of your cast and crew were people you knew, and how much it was just people you brought on board that were kind of like new to the group?
That's a really good question, because I think I would say maybe 20% were people that I've worked with before, and then maybe 80% new people. You know, our core
Nice.
production
Wow,
team.
that's impressive.
Our core production team, like me, George, Joel, Mark Marini, Sandy, who is a co-producer on it. We've all worked together before, and I'm sure there's a few other people that I'm forgetting. And John Vogel is a friend of mine. He was the main actor, but then there were 3 other main actors that we ended up holding castings for.
Oh,
actually,
nice.
Ari, who played Pitt, I worked with him before. So maybe it ends up becoming half and half. But there was a bunch of other fresh faces that I didn't work with before, and we certainly held a lot of castings for the role of Enzo and for Marisol and for a lot of the other roles.
How well did it flow with people that, like, you know, everyone has their own inside language and all that? How was it with the people that came in that, you know, didn't really know anybody, was a fresh face coming into a group that was about half people you knew?
It flowed. I would say it flowed fairly well. Obviously, there's things that I would have done differently, and there's a lot of things we were doing very DIY, like our cinematographer Alex, when he was lighting, like we would use shower curtains as diffusion.
Nice.
He was like spray painting light bulbs using
Love
spray
it.
paint from Home Depot.
Nice.
Yeah, and things like that. Which at first, our producer George Rudai, for him that was sort of jarring. He's like, why is he doing this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, because he came from a more traditional filmmaking sensibility of studying film and going to school, where Alex had all these kind of hacks and tricks. And you know, we ended up shooting the film on a Blackmagic cinema camera.
Okay.
We rented Cook lenses.
Oh, nice.
So you know.
Yeah.
Oh, I love me Cooks.
Yeah, and then Alex also had a Sigma lens, which was really nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Nice. So
And
speaking of Alex,
Yeah, I was going to ask about the approach to the cinematography. You mentioned you had a lot of hacks and stuff, but was it mostly kind of small lighting and working with what was available, or did you bring in a lot of gear and have...
We had a lot... Actually, it was only a small amount of lights, but we did have some Kino flows, some tungsten lights. So he used kind of a combination of Kinos, bouncing them with tungstens, which I think there was a older guy named Jose Martinez that was an established gaffer who was on set a couple times. He was like, "You guys are doing this salt and pepper thing." Like, I like
Yeah, nice.
yeah. But yeah,
Love it.
so and then we did a lot of bounce light, and so Alex and I spent a lot of time discussing kind of in pre-production, you know, what's my visual aesthetic, what films that I really respond to. So showing him, you know, different things that I was really influenced by at the time, that I said, hey, could you check this out? And I think he did an outstanding job really kind of capturing that.
yeah,
Yeah,
the cinematography
excellent.
was awesome. It looked great.
Were there any shots that you just got and didn't light at all? And just use what was available, the available light?
I'm trying to think here. Not a lot, because the Blackmagic, it's a good camera, but it's definitely a light hog, that
Yeah.
camera. So it's, you know, being a low light camera is not really the strength of the Blackmagic.
Definitely.
So it requires a lot of light, except for some outdoor scenes, you know, where, you know, we didn't have to, you know, there was just enough sunlight that I don't think we had to do anything. There was a couple of shots, you know.
Wide shot in the church. How much light? Or was that post? I mean, the beams coming in through the windows. Loved it.
Yeah, there was a good amount of lights there. I think, yeah, we had to bring all the lights that we had
Okay.
to that shot, and Alex did a really great job.
That shot, I was
But
like,
it
hell
is
yeah.
a beautiful church too. Once you're like there in person, you're like, wow, this is a great find. So we had to do it justice, of course, with the lights that. You know,
And that was just like somebody you knew that got you into the church?
George, our producer, ended up finding that, and I think we had to pay a small fee, but it was an amazing find.
That's
'Cause
awesome.
That was one of the most difficult locations to
Yeah.
source. That was one of the last things that we shot. It was, you know, sort of after the initial schedule,
Uh-huh.
because we weren't finding the church. I found a church in the Bronx on 138th Street that I thought looked perfect, but they weren't giving us access. And then the church that George found really closely matched that church, although it was in Times Square. It wasn't in Manhattan. It wasn't in the Bronx, rather. It was in Manhattan. But in that, it just sort of looked like that kind of style of church where Marisol would attend.
Nice. Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that church was beautiful. You
Thank you. Yeah,
you guys did it great service to that church.
Yeah. Even those candle scenes, the way Alex Gray, that's our cinematographer's name, Alex Gray, the way he lit those candle scenes where Marisol is lighting the candles,
Yeah.
I thought those came out fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I knew right there in person. I'm like, this is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
You know?
And you were right.
Well, let's talk about the Western vibe. We definitely got that from the movie. We watched it and we were like, this is very much like a spaghetti, like an urban Western.
Urban spaghetti western, exactly.
What kind of techniques did you do, aside from story and things like that, to get that vibe through?
So I think we used a lot of wide angles. I purposely made the film that it's kind of like a slow burn in a way, where we're not doing quick cuts. For instance, I think the music, we had an original score from these Bronx-based musicians named Andrew Marinaccio and Michael Stevens. They wrote the score for the film as the film was being written, essentially. I was speaking to them, and they always wanted to do a Western. And so I always knew from day one that working with those guys, that would really bring a lot to the table in terms of the fabric of that. And I think just the flow of the story and kind of the shot structures, we tried to do it that way without trying to make it corny. If that makes any sense.
No,
without
absolutely.
trying to like phone it in and be like, oh, let's make it an over the top Western. It's kind of more like on the subtle side of being a Western.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think it was when we first heard the music, and it was the Western, like the standard. I don't want to say standard, but the kind of music that you hear in every Western. We were like, oh, all right. And then we started picking it up a little bit. I think the music did a really great job of setting up the mood of like it's a showdown, and it's good versus evil, or in your case, geek versus thug. The music was great.
Yeah. And I do think for me it was the fact that you played a lot of it in the wides, like you said, which is definitely sort of a spaghetti Western move. You had, and there wasn't like in the scenes, there wasn't a lot of like fast editing or like too many cuts.
Right.
A lot of those films, they definitely played a lot in sort of like single takes, or like they did longer takes and stuff like that, which I thought was really cool that you did that.
There was no the doo-doo-doo-doo, wow wow, which would have been too much.
Right,
Like,
it would have been too much.
It would have been too much. It would have been like,
Although we did throw in the Bronx tumbleweed, what I call the Bronx tumbleweed, where we have a garbage bag. Like the
Yep,
frame. You used to see that a couple times.
Well played. Well played.
And one thing that was definitely a very conscious decision that I did was, although the film takes place in an urban setting, which is the South Bronx, I very much try to portray it feeling like a small town, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, because it kind of seemed like everyone knew each other. It was like kind of like,
That
this is my
sort of
neighborhood kind of thing.
And the exact shots that I got, we basically, the locations, we tried to film in places where there weren't too many cars, and we tried to film in places sometimes where it was kind of desolate looking, because that's traditionally how that neighborhood in the most southern tip of the Bronx looks like. So I just always thought that was kind of cool. And, there's some sprawling locations.
Yeah.
You'd have a mural with graffiti on it, but it just always felt very cinematic to me. Or sometimes you're walking in that neighborhood, you'll see like a gang of kids driving by on dirt bikes. They have like motorized dirt bikes, and just like there's like 50 or 100 of them. And you're like, man, that's like really cool looking.
Yeah.
It's scary if you're in the middle of them, but it's kind of cool looking. Although they're harmless. I got to know some of those guys. They're just like riding dirt bikes, really.
What did you use for the Carolina at the end when he sent the postcard?
Good question. We used upstate New York.
Ah, nice.
Shout out to my Aunt Vera, who let us film.
Shout out to Aunt Vera. What up, Aunt Vera?
Yeah, she's the best. And so that was her house in Hopewell Junction, New York. And I always thought, I'm like, man, if there's a place that could look like Carolina, it's that house upstate,
Yeah,
oh, yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Yeah, I was like, oh, okay.
So all those places that I knew, and I think that's important for any independent filmmakers doing stuff on a low or no budget, just all these things that you have access to, keep them in your back pocket, put them in the binder, whatever, just write for those things.
Absolutely.
Write in a way where you could utilize what you have resources for.
Definitely.
I mean, we keep pushing that because we run into filmmakers who are doing their first feature or a no budget feature a lot, and they're like, well, I want, this expansive space, and I want this. It's like, well, how much budget do you have for your location? Nothing. It's like, oh, well, maybe you should change your script a little bit, because you have,
not just locations, but like props and cars and whatever.
One of the features that we produced, it was written around the fact that our friend had his girlfriend, now wife, her family had a cabin in Tahoe. So it was like it started as a one location kind of place, and then the story evolved to multiple locations. But most of it took place in that cabin because it was free, and it's like you can't.
Exactly, that's the move.
You can't put a price on free. That sounds really stupid, but yeah.
Speaking of, we didn't go over what the budget was. Do you mind?
Oh no,
you can say under anything. You don't have to give the exact budget.
Sure. I'll be happy to talk about it. So I mentioned to you guys over email that when we started shooting it, we had $12,500, but that's not really accurate toward the budget because it really sort of blew up to closer to about $50,000 over time. You know, and I mean over a 3-year span. And it kind of ties into my philosophy about, which is still nothing for a feature film.
Yeah, definitely. No, absolutely.
Yep.
You know, and then that's not even counting this, you know, the sweat equity of just what I call McDonald's hours. How much would I get? If I was working at McDonald's, how much would I get paid working on this film? And that's hundreds and hundreds of hours. Even if working at minimum wage, that would add up. Yeah, you know, and then just everybody who called in a favor. But yeah, I would say between like 40 and 50-ish in terms of actual resources that we put into the film.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty common actually for you to start out with, you know, a certain budget and get going a little bit higher. That happened with our project as well. I think some things popped up that we weren't expecting. You know, those little
that's what
things.
happened to us. So there was a couple of people that said they were going to put a lot more money into it that didn't put the money into it, and then it turns out there were people that said they were going to put in less that put in more because they started believing in the project. So it all worked out in the end. But I do think it's really important to sort of get it going and build that momentum, because once you do that, then it could sort of build the excitement for people to kind of you know, pour their resources into it, or you know, even volunteer on it or whatever it is to help you get the film made. But once the train is going, it's easier for it to sort of get finished.
Absolutely. And how long was that train going? What was your production schedule like?
So at first, we basically had a 17-day schedule. So it was like a little bit more than 2 weeks of almost continuous shooting. Although we stopped because of a couple of emergencies that happened. Particularly with our cinematographer, he had an emergency that happened which shut us down for 2 days, and that was maybe 5 days into the shoot, and we weren't anticipating that. And it was a bad situation in the moment because we had everything really tightly scheduled. Although I will say about those kind of bad situations, and I think they're going to happen almost on any set, especially on a no budget.
Yeah, even if you get to $100 million, that stuff happens all the time.
On a big budget film. So I think it's important for any filmmaker to use those negative things and try to find a positive. So when we shut down for 2 days, it was really bad, but I didn't let it ruin the movie. In fact, we used those 2 days to prepare more for things that, you know, maybe we were sort of underprepared for. So we just used those couple of days to like really hustle and, you know, dress the setup for the poker den sequence and, you know, get the warehouse ready for that final card game sequence that we're going to shoot. And so I think we used those negative things that happen and try to come out with a positive. And then so then there was those initial 17 days, and then there was maybe another 10 days of pickup shots throughout the duration of a year and a half. So I would say like principal photography was really that initial stretch, and then our last shot was like a year and a half later, which is a decent amount of time.
Yeah.
But it kind of ties into my philosophy, which I think, you know, a bunch of people say in film, that you can't do something fast, cheap, and good.
Oh yeah.
Oh, really, that's what we tell everyone we work with. That's my go-to.
Yeah, I'm glad that is your go-to, because that's definitely my go-to. You know, so I knew that we wanted to do something good. Of course, we're doing it cheap because we didn't have the proper budget. So I knew by nature we couldn't rush it. I just knew that we just couldn't rush this thing. Yep. Because it would be really catastrophic for the picture if we rushed it. So we ended up taking our time.
Nice.
And what was the post process like? Did you work with an editor?
I did. I worked with an editor named Christina Nicolai. Shout out to Christina because she did an amazing job.
What up, Christina?
Christina basically started off as an intern for us at Alphabet City Films, and she had a little bit of an editing background, and she had definitely never edited a feature. But I really trusted Christina. I said, you know, and I knew that she would do a great job, and she did. And I told her, you know, I kind of instructed her, hey, first cut for performance. You know, when you're going through the shots, when you're going through the sequences, first cut for performance. It's our film is sort of complicated because it jumbles around in time.
Yeah, and it goes to multiple stories.
There's 4 separate characters, and it jumbles around in time. So there's almost like 4 stories from different perspectives. So it's kind of ambitious in that sort of regard because, you know, it's way easier, especially from an editing standpoint, to tell a linear story. That, you know, has a beginning and has an end, and it doesn't jump around in time. But Christina did a great job, and then I kind of jumped in at a certain point. Like, she basically made a cut that was pretty solid, and then I sat and worked with the film for another period of time. And I had an assistant editor named Jason Malizia, and so I worked on it really closely. And Jason helped out a lot too. And it's always good to have another eye, I feel like.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
First I was working with Christina.
Crucial.
Yeah.
Because you get so after just watching the whole thing over and over again and seeing scenes over and over, you just lose total.
Yes.
Like you have no clue what it's even
because you know
going
where
on
it's going to
anymore.
go, so you're like, oh, that's fine. And other people are like, wait, what?
And what we did, I don't know if anybody else has ever done this, but I made a binder because we weren't 100% sure, because things were changing around and things were getting jumbled in time. So we couldn't really give every scene a number. So what I decided to do at a certain point was give each scene a 4-letter random word. I used like a 4-letter word generator, made like a binder with like a still from every scene, and we gave it like a random 4-letter, what we called like an alphanumeric or whatever. It's just really a random word.
Okay.
You know, it could be like bird. This scene is bird. It has nothing to do with the scene, but just so we could not feel like we were tied to any numbers. We could look at that binder and then shuffle things around, take things out, you know, and then
That's cool.
not be bound by that.
That's a really cool idea. So what is next? Now you said you're premiering in Vegas. Are you looking at distribution? Are you looking at...
So next is really we're looking at distribution. Personally, I just want as many eyeballs on this film as possible. So, you know, and we're not really looking to get rich from this film. It would be really nice to make our money back.
Yeah.
But I would just like as wide of an audience as possible, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so are you doing the festival route? Are you doing
to some extent, yes. I mean, we're premiering our film next month at Action on Film. So if anybody's out in Vegas, we'd love to have you guys there at the premiere of the film.
Sweet.
It's going to screen in a crisp 5.1 surround mix.
Ooh.
Nice.
Yeah. DCP.
Ooh, that's nice.
Where do you know where it's at? Is it the Brendan Theater?
Yep, at the Brendan Theater.
Nice.
Alex grew up in Vegas.
I did.
Oh, did you? Oh,
I
cool.
did, yes.
Is it a good theater?
It is. It's very nice. Yeah.
Excellent.
It's probably one of the best in Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Awesome.
There you go.
All right.
Killing it.
I'm even more excited.
So we interviewed on Tuesday Jason Brubeck from Distribber, and you know he's talking about how all these people come in and they're like, oh, I want Netflix is my goal. I know you said you want as many eyes on it, but what is your what would make you happy if it like the worst case scenario?
Sure,
like,
I'd be thrilled with Netflix or even Amazon Prime. I think they're doing a lot these days. That would be amazing.
Are you gonna look for a sales agent type of thing to take it out to like AFM and Ken and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's something we're definitely discussing right now with George. So,
Right on.
Yeah.
nice.
Very cool. So let's talk about lessons learned. What was the biggest?
It's time to give advice to everyone out there.
Yeah,
give
some advice.
your words of wisdom if you have any. We don't, but other people do.
One of the biggest lessons you learned along the way that kind of stick out to you right now?
It's sort of funny looking back because on our first day of shoot, we shot the cemetery scene. And in the middle of the day, it was piping hot. There was lawnmowers going off in the background.
Yeah.
It's a complicated scene because it's one of the most pivotal scenes in the film, really. And you see it 2 different times from different perspectives of the movie. It's, you know, it's where Billy has to make his case to Pitt for Pitt to help him out.
Yep.
And that's where the movie pivots. And that was one of the earliest shots that I imagined. I drew a crude storyboard of a guy sitting on laying by a tombstone, and then on the other side of the tombstone, the other guy has his back to that tombstone. So that was one of the first visuals that I had of the film.
Yeah.
But to do that the first day,
Oof.
looking back, I'm like, what were we thinking? Like, that was way too ambitious. It turned out terribly. We actually had to redo that.
Really?
Yeah, because the sound was a nightmare. The light wasn't consistent. So we'd film with Billy, and then 5 minutes later, the sun was in a different spot.
Yep.
You know? And then we thought, well, like, hey, this scene should take place at night. But you actually see it in the movie.
Oh, so the original script didn't have it at night, because in the final cut, it's at night.
Right. And that's why Billy comes in during the day. When he walks to the cemetery, it's during the day. But he's there for a few hours, and then we did a time lapse.
Nice. I didn't even... Yeah.
Then it became part of the story where you know, he hung out in the cemetery for a few hours because, you know...
That's a good tip right there.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay.
So I think that is important to really consider the order of operations on things. I wouldn't go that bold on the next movie as far as a scene that has that heavy of performances and that it's that ambitious. That's one thing, of course.
Gotcha.
And then there's definitely a bunch of things that I think I would do. I think I would spend even more time in pre-production because the way this movie came together was incredibly fast. It was almost miraculously fast.
Okay.
I think in March or in April, in March it was an idea. By April it was a script. By July 1st we were shooting the movie.
Wow. That is fast.
Yeah, but that was 2015.
Yeah.
So that was 3 years ago at this point. So then it became a bunch of time of working on it to really kind of, you know, make sure that I don't want to say perfect, but make sure that it's in a place where we're happy. Because I think a film is never perfect. I heard a quote, I forget who said it, but a filmmaker is never done with his movie. There's just a point where you just stop working on it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny. We went to USC and they always have Steven Spielberg come in for a class. They teach a class on Spielberg, and our friend asked Spielberg, "He's like, when are you done with them? Like, are you ever happy with a movie?" He's like, "I'm never happy with a movie. I'm just satisfied when I can watch it on the big screen and not cringe and like not look away or like that." So you're never happy. You never think a movie's perfect, but you can deal with it.
Yeah.
And so I mean.
On our first cut, by the way, we were cringing. We were like, "Oh man!" Me and Christina turned to each other. Well, we were like, "We tried to make a movie," and then at first, so that was really discouraging. And then I heard Martin Scorsese say that on a masterclass. He was like, "If you don't watch your first cut, if you don't get physically sick watching your first cut of the movie, something is wrong." And so then I'm like, all right, so even the masters are saying that. So.
And then you just sat there and was like, I am Martin Scorsese.
Nailed it,
guys.
Not at all.
Nailed it.
Except at least I felt like, okay, you know, I heard even Coppola, when he first watched The Godfather with his editor, he was like, what do you think? He was like, well, we tried to make a gangster movie.
I mean, that's good advice because, you know, so many people, when they're doing a no budget, they'll shoot their film, they'll put as much money as they can into it, but it's never enough. And then they'll sit down and they'll edit it and they'll be like, well, we screwed up we screwed up in production. Like, we screwed up, blah, blah, blah. But if you just step back and then retool the edit, you can pull a story out of it a lot easier than people think, because they always think like, well, this was only 25,000. If I had 50,000, I would have made it much better. It's like, no, just you got the coverage, you got the story, just gotta not be so.
Don't be hasty.
Yeah, exactly. And don't be so married to the first edit.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
Be afraid to. Do you know what? I'm gonna edit it a little differently this time.
Oh, totally. I agree. I think. One of the things that we really did right was pay attention to the sound. Our sound guy, Nick Doe, he did a great job, but he was the highest paid guy on set. We didn't know Nick, you know, but...
I support this so much.
Yes.
If you guys listen to this podcast, you know what we say about sound. Do not skimp on the sound.
Yeah,
we put a lot of money, too, in the sound design. We had a guy named Julian Evans. He's outstanding. He has a studio in Brooklyn, and we sprung for the 5.1 mix, but I spent a lot of time with Julian, kind of working on the sound design, and he brought a lot to the table as well. And so that was a very conscious decision. We were like, man, people on their first film or on no-budget films, they really don't pay attention to the sound, and it comes back to bite them later on.
So bad.
Hugely. I used to work in acquisitions at an international sales agency and distribution company, and the first thing that we noticed when watching the movies was the sound. I mean, as soon as you realize the sound's not good, you just turn it off.
Yeah,
completely.
you just tune out.
And surprisingly, there were a lot of them. So just having good sound puts you above so many other films out there that are trying to, compete and get distribution and stuff. So, I mean, it makes so much sense to just, pay whatever you got to pay to make it happen because it's so important to the film,
So that was something that I think we did right.
It's so funny that you we harp on sound so much because we're not sound guys, and sound guys are so important. And it's like no matter how much money you put in, you still show up at a location and there's somebody doing a lawnmower in the background. It's come on! Yeah. we did a $60,000 short out of college. We were working on that, and it was like we shot at this cemetery. It was actually just down the street a little bit from here, and it was like. They got the permits, we're all good, and it's like every 5 minutes, it's like hold for plane, and this giant plane would flow over, and it's like sometimes you just can't control it, but the things you can control, you should definitely put up the money for that. And speaking of money, I want to ask you, so you said it was about $50,000 all said and done.
Right.
How much of that was production and how much, because you said you sat down, did a 5.1 mix, how much of the money was production and then a little post-production? Because when you bring in professionals, which you should if you can afford it, especially doing a 5.1 mix or a sound engineer, how much would you think, like percentage-wise, was like production and then post-production?
I would say a little bit more was production, maybe... honestly, it's about half and half.
Okay.
Really. Yeah, half and half came out to be.
That's well worth it once you hear the sound. The sound, and I think the first thing, like Alex said, the first thing that takes you out of a movie, especially when it's a low budget feature, is if it sounds just bad, like on camera audio, or the Foley mix is bad, or like there's just it's not the levels are bad, and then you're done. And like first 5 minutes, I'm like, I'm
and I guess I'm also including some of the reshoots because in earlier short films, I've always been against doing reshoots. Like I never liked the idea of doing reshoots. I mean, who does really? You don't want to have to go back and feel like what you did before was wasted.
Yeah.
But I think I've changed my mentality a lot because it matters what the outcome is, So that's the most important thing. So I think when I first started filmmaking, I was all excited about the process and, being on set and, I thought this is amazing. But being on set, those things are great, but it's not the end all be all. The end all be all is the outcome of the film that you're trying to make. So I think I'm a firm believer in that.
Yeah.
One thing that I would do differently thinking about it, though, is aside from spending more time in pre-production and aside from I would consider production design at an earlier stage even. Because we brought in Clarissa and she was amazing, but on my next feature, I think I'm going to think about production design way earlier, even on a script level almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the earlier you can get on everything, the better.
Exactly. Yeah. And also... I would take more time. I wouldn't rush on certain scenes. I would give myself more time, do more takes, just kind of let things...
That's the delicate balance, though, because when you are so strapped for cash and time, it's like...
I know.
Can I do this pivotal scene 20 times, or...
Do I push this other scene for this shot?
So
that is the tough balance. That's why I don't know. I don't know if I could do a film this low budget for the next one. I think I'd have to bring up the budget at least...
just maybe not to spend more on equipment or crew or cast, but just to spread out the production a little bit. Like give a pivotal scene a whole day to shoot rather than having to run and gun. And that's what we're all working for, is to get that flexibility of being like, you know what, this scene in this moment, I'm going to take the whole day, set it up, talk to the actors, get it perfect. Take the 10-hour shoot day and just do this one scene because it's so important.
Right.
That's what we all strive for. If it only was that easy. If only it was that easy.
My wife did all the catering and my mother-in-law, so shout out to them. One thing that we do at Alphabet City Films is we always feed our casting crew.
Super crucial.
Your wife's name is?
Anila.
Shout out to you. If you want to send us free food, go right ahead. Zef's friend is going to send us booze as well. So we're just going to get a bunch of free stuff. We're not ashamed of it at all. So please, just
I find out the real reason I'm on here.
Just so we get fed and drunk on other people's dimes. That's what we're hoping.
Yeah. Well, I actually have some stories about that too, like horror stories. The opposite, where the production wasn't. Focused on the food and like feeding people and providing people with the drinks, and it was actually my fault because I was a young producer at the time and I just didn't know.
You were never young.
You're right. I came out
with
32,
a full beard.
But man, it really does make a huge difference when the crew's happy and, you know, not thinking about when they're going to be eaten next because they're starving and, you know.
There's so many little things. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard horror stories where actors have told me, they're like, oh, this is so great that you feed us, because I've been on set where you're working like a 16-hour day and they just give you a couple slices of pizza and that's it. I'm like, whoa.
Oof. Yeah,
That's
I mean,
pretty rough.
It pays off in ways people don't realize, that if you put some money into the catering, or have someone like your wife being able to cater for the production, it's like, it just makes everyone happier, and then you can do the whole like, hey guys, you know, I know it's a 10-hour work week. Can you stay an extra hour? Like, you know, can we just stay an extra hour to get the scene? It just works so much easier.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to consider, because essentially I'm not really credited as a producer on the film, because I'm not one of these people that wants to take a credit for this and a credit for that. But essentially, on a no-budget film, you have to be a producer when you're directing. You can't just... It's a fantasy if you think you're just going to show up on set and just everything is going to be laid out. And shout out to George. George and Joel, they did so much. And the whole production team, Sandy and everybody. But
shout out to you, George, if you want to send us anything free. Awesome. Come on. I got to stop that. All right. I mean, yeah.
But so, from that side of filmmaking, I think, what you're doing is events planning, if you think about it. It's like you are planning out an event 17 days in a row.
That's a great analogy.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And you need food at that event. People need to be fed.
Yeah.
That is true.
I mean, I completely agree with that. If you don't take care of your cast and crew, you're going to get a revolt, and people are not going to show up with the best intentions.
And that's one thing I've noticed. I'm just kind of witnessing and being a fly on a wall on big budget films, where I notice that even if it's if they're shooting a TV show in New York or whatever, it's a union shoot, they just have an abundance of food. And that's for a reason. If like the people get hungry, there's something to eat at any moment.
Yep.
Costco's great. Just give me a pack of muffins.
Oh man.
Costco me some muffins.
Yeah, it's kind of a joke too. It's just like there's always muffins and bagels at the Crafty.
Yep.
And gummy candies.
And goldfish.
And gum.
Yeah.
That's it? That's all you need?
Yep.
Nope, not really. All right, so if you had a brand new filmmaker right in front of you who is about to embark on his very first feature film.
I'll say it. It's Alex.
It's me.
It's a brand new filmmaker. He's a brand new filmmaker.
Yes. And they asked you for one piece of advice on financing.
Ooh, that is a tough question.
Yeah.
That's always...
I know.
Trump's got him.
And I think for those of us that are creative, that's not the thing that gets us going.
It's not. Definitely not.
No. We would have taken a career on Wall Street, but we chose to become filmmakers, knowing that that's not the path to riches. But what I would say is write for your budget. I think each script dictates its own budget. Don't write this epic sci-fi movie thinking that you could do that on a shoestring budget, or don't take out one of your scripts that you wrote on spec thinking that that could be your low budget film. Really truly consider your budget before the story is even developed, and try to use the resources that you have at your disposal. Be willing to put your own resources into it. Then I think you're more likely to get other people to really believe in your project once you are so serious about it happening. And it has to really happen. I think there's a lot of people that they're trying to get something going, then it doesn't quite get going. But I think if people see that there's like a definite start date, I think things are way more likely to happen, and people are way more likely to invest money into your film.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That's a good point, yeah.
I do think a lot of people have the floating date. It's like, well, whenever we get it, all the money is when we're going to start.
Right.
But I think that leaves a lot of people feeling concerned.
That,
Yeah.
What's going to happen to my money if you don't get all the money?
Yeah.
Maybe I won't give until you get all the money, and then I'll give a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's probably the thing that made it happen, that I said I was extremely decisive about. We're going to film this movie in July,
That's a good call. Once you have a set date, people are like, "Oh, this is really happening." So I should, if I'm on board, I should be on board now.
Right.
All right. Great advice.
I think that'll do it. Hopefully, it was worth the wait for everyone out there. We finally got Zef here.
Thank you.
Finally
guys.
got him. Yeah, thanks so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us in the studio as our very first in-studio guest.
Hey!
Keep up the great work, fellas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and good luck at the premiere in Vegas.
Thank you.
Survive. Come back to us.
Check out The Trouble. Can I give it a shout out?
Absolutely.
dude,
give it a shout out. Give it a shout out.
www.troublefilm.com.
No hyphens, no underscores.
That's
Troublefilm.com. Well, thanks, Zef, for all the time, for, I'm going to say it, for flying specifically out from New York for this podcast, because
That was so nice of you.
so nice, so nice. And, we feel very honored, but it's kind of expected now.
Yep.
So, okay, Alex, time to get into the what's cool, tell everyone about what we think is awesome in the world of filmmaking gear, because we're gearheads. What do you got?
Well, the first thing I found was Assimilate Scratch's Play Pro, which,
Love-hate with this.
it allows ProRes encoding on Windows.
What?
Which
The
has
holy grail for the
been
longest time.
an issue for quite some time.
Yep.
Because Apple has made it nearly impossible.
Yeah, they really just hold on to that thing like it's, oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so it's like, okay, finally, I wonder what Assimilate had to pay for that.
I
For
know.
that license. I like that idea, but again,
I just still wonder how viable ProRes is going to be in like the next coming years.
well,
because
they just did ProRes RAW. They're introducing ProRes RAW.
that's true. I just feel like they keep sort of tiptoeing in and then backing out with stuff.
I know. I can't trust Apple on the video sense, because for a while they were going to discontinue Final Cut. Now they brought back Final Cut and all this stuff. I also just don't like that it's another step in transcoding. This might be our spoiled by riches. We have a couple Macs here. They're not the fastest Macs. And so if we're able to, open in Premiere, edit, bring it over to the Mac, and export directly out into ProRes, boom, baby, love it. But if we have to do it on Windows, you have to export out into one format and then bring it into Assimilate and export it out in Premiere Pro. And, not that it's that much of a difference, but as you start encoding over and over again, you lose some quality.
Yeah. Plus, I feel like, assuming everything is working properly, the time it takes to export out something for Scratch will be much greater than the time to open a Premiere file on a Mac.
Yeah, as long as you have some network drives, so you don't have to
so
transfer
if you
drives,
have
or you just put it on a hard drive. But yeah, I would say that it's probably if somebody could only afford one computer, this is a nice option to get a PC that they can build and is very powerful and still do ProRes, which is kind of like some reason everyone's still up in the ass about ProRes.
Only certain people, though. I feel like it's kind of dying down. Like I said, I think
I don't know, man. That infomercial that we shot and I edited, the broadcast company, the company that was responsible for distributing it out to all the like regional networks, ProRes. That's for broadcast.
Yeah, but I mean, even in distribution, when they had deliverables, they asked for ProRes, but I feel like it was just a suggestion because that's what they thought they needed, but there's many other options, so I feel like they would take. Yeah,
it's tough because this company was like, we need it ProRes, and they've been doing it for a long time, but
that's true.
At the same time, I don't know.
But anyway, so that's an option now, which is kind of cool, I guess, to have it as an option, because it has never been an option.
Yeah. So what else I saw that was cool? We talked to I don't know if it was last podcast or the podcast before about that external GPU of Blackmagic. Now I failed to let everyone know because I'm dumb that it was only for Apple. It was only for Macs.
It's like Apple and Blackmagic teamed up to make it.
It's kind of like our codecs and our
our
Vericam, and
they're just in bed together, and you can't rip them apart.
I'll get in there. I have a way of breaking things apart, but no, it's called the XGlim EX Core eGPU, and what it is that's
a different thing than
yes. Oh yeah. So what's cool is the Blackmagic thing was only for Macs. So there's a Kickstarter now. Or is it Indiegogo?
Indiegogo.
It's an Indiegogo. It's the XGlim EX Core eGPU, and it's an external graphics card.
It's probably not as crazy as the...
No, because it's pocket size. It's pocket size. The Blackmagic one is about the size... It looked, from the renderings, bigger than a Mac trash can, which is crazy. But this thing is pocket-sized. It's a GeForce GTX 1050, 5 gigabytes of RAM, 640 CUDA cores, and it's USB-C. And for all those computer nerds out there like me, they're getting close to having peripherals be the same speed as internal cards. So soon enough, I don't know if they can say it with USB-C, but the next version of USB is going to be as fast as if you had installed a hard drive or a card directly into your computer. And so that's like the holy grail, because then that means you can have everything external and just add on as you want. So this little card basically just gives you some graphic power to render and do some VFX and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you can't install a better card in your laptop or something like that.
Which I think is pretty cool. I mean,
yeah.
I do a lot on my laptop, and my laptop has like an okay graphics card as far as like laptops graphics go. Mm-hmm. But having another one, if you can lose them,
if you can crossfire them or something like that, yeah,
that'd be pretty bomb.
Oh man, yeah, that would be amazing. So yeah, it's only $3.99 through the Indiegogo,
I think so.
The pre-order.
It's like the early bird right now.
That's not bad. That's the cost of some graphics cards, so that's not bad. Not bad. Something to keep an eye out on, see what they do with it, and look at the renders and the video footage that it can produce. But that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel like they're advertising it mostly right now for gaming and stuff.
Yeah.
But hey,
Yeah, I mean, they should definitely start moving that also into rendering if they really want to blow it up.
Yep.
All
right, what else we got? We got the Lupo Super Panel, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I think we talked about some Lupo lights earlier in the podcast, but these are some different ones that they just announced, I believe, that are called the Super Panel, and they are Sky Panel competitors. And they are a fraction of the cost. I think 1/3 of the cost of Sky Panels, if I'm not mistaken.
That's crazy.
Maybe more, even more so than
and that's the thing. Once you get into a third of the cost, I can deal with not having all the bells and whistles that a Sky Panel has.
Yeah, and it has a lot of bells and whistles. It does. Yeah? It does the full hue control. Mm-hmm. It does the saturation, green, magenta. It does gels. It does some effects.
Nice.
Like strobes and police lights and stuff like that. But the one thing I read is that it doesn't really have the same build quality. For those of you who have used Sky Panels, you could probably toss those off a boat.
I could run over those things with a car, and the car would probably have more damage than the Sky Panels.
I think so. But the thing about Sky Panels is they are beefy heavy, super big. And I think the Lupos are, again, a fraction of the weight.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm all about that. I think, when you're dealing with Sky Panels and the big tank lights, I mean, those are excellent, especially if you're using them all the time or you're renting them out a lot and they could get a lot of wear and tear. But if it's like an owner operator situation and you're using it yourself, I mean, why you don't need it to be built like a tank, and also it could hurt you that it's just so heavy and you don't even want to take it out with you because it is so huge.
Especially mounted in a studio. Do you know if it has DMX control?
I believe so.
Oh, well, that's even better. You can hang those bad boys up and just control them with the DMX board, and there you go. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it uses the same accessories as their other lights, so they have soft boxes and grids and stuff for it.
All right,
cool.
Right. Not bad. So I also, we harp on the sound people here, but you know what? Every once in a while, you got to do your own sound. It just is inevitable, especially if you're doing small gigs. So Rode actually introduced this SC6-L mobile interview kit, and it's this little breakout box that plugs into the Lightning port of your iPhone, and it has inputs for 2 of Rode's pro grade lavaliers. And so basically it just gives you a little recorder on set or on an interview that connects directly. It's not even a recorder, it's just a breakout box that connects to your phone and uses your phone as an recorder for 2 lavalier inputs. So you can kind of just, do your thing, have a sweet lavalier sound and record on set and record on location.
That's kind of cool. I know they've had kind of phone lavs for a while that you just plug straight in to the phone.
Yeah.
And those are kind of cool. I mean, kind of limited depending on what the scenario is, but if you're able to use it more make your phone more like a real recorder.
Yeah.
And run multiple mics into it even.
Yeah, I think that's
cool.
The big thing. I mean, the fact that it is there's things out there that let you do 1 lavalier, but the fact that this allows 2 So you can have like a guest and a host. That's pretty sweet.
That is cool. But how long is the cable scenario? Because
you
have this like phone floating in between you guys, like a suspension bridge.
That's true, but don't quote me on this. They are 1/8 jack, so you could probably get another 1/8 jack extender.
That's true.
Yeah, so not bad. What else you got? Give me something.
All right. Well, I think HP just announced some new Z workstations.
Oh man,
they're more affordable, kind of smaller than the usual.
Ooh,
you know, they're kind of, I think, aimed at not like the super pro ones that are like 10 grand for a workstation. You know, I think I want to say they started like $500.
Jeez,
you know
that's not bad.
Which I'm all about. Personally, because we use the ZBook
laptops,
mobile workstations.
I love it. That thing, I can edit 4K on my laptop, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, and so now they have the Z2 Mini G4, which is like, you know, kind of like those tiny little, almost puck like PCs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like a mini PC.
Yeah.
So it's like they have one of those.
Okay.
Which is kind of cool. And it has like an NVIDIA Quadro P1000, which isn't, you know, the greatest thing out there, but
yeah,
I mean, for a little mini PC, it's not bad.
Not bad. I'm looking at this, the G4 workstation,
Z2 small form factor, Z2 tower. I got all sorts of stuff, and yeah, it looks like they just launched them as of July 2018.
Yeah, wow, yeah. I mean, these aren't expensive. These aren't your top of the line. These are like $750.
I was wrong. Yeah, $700, $800.
Yeah, these are like their like entry workstations. So there's some Z's that are like ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
There's like
I'm sure you can spec these out even higher, because that's kind of how they work. You know, you go in there and you're like, okay, I'm going to get this little mini thing, and then I'm going to boost up the RAM and the graphics and add like a bigger hard drive or whatever, and you know, you can do all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
but I mean, entry level workstation. I mean, if it's a render beast, to hook that up to a network and just have that do your renders, you don't even need to edit on it. That works for me.
Yep, not bad.
I'll take that. Okay, and then there's also finally the Sony Virtual Production Service, which is kind of like, how would you describe it?
It's like a cloud-based switching, like live switching production service, which is interesting. They claim that if you have a camera with Wi-Fi capabilities, you can connect to it.
And Sony sells a lot of like Wi-Fi dongles that you can add to your camera. So if it doesn't come built in, you can actually buy separate ones that just allow you to add Wi-Fi to any camera.
Yeah, or any camera that has 4G at least.
Yeah.
And I think it can handle up to 6 cameras simultaneously. And you can create like a whole live production, you know, live switch.
That's awesome.
Stream it to Facebook, YouTube Live, or your website or whatever. And it is, I mean, it's not cheap. I will say that.
I think they said about 4 hours of live broadcasting a month is about $350.
Correct.
And 7 is about $820.
Correct.
So it's not cheap, but if you're doing an event, you know, like one event that is 3 hours a month and you are getting $1,500.
Not bad.
Not bad. I think
it's better than buying a whole TriCaster system or whatever.
Blackmagic ATM.
And then...
It's kind of funny that we should talk about in another podcast. We had talked to the owner of Film and TV Pro about the rise of 5G, and how that's going to revolutionize everything. And this kind of seems like the step between 5G and where we are now. This Sony.
Yeah, I feel like 5G is going to take it to a whole different level.
5G is going to change us all around, and we'll talk about that in a later podcast, because that's some
whole
cool
other
stuff.
topic.
That's a whole topic we do a whole podcast on, because that's going to change the world of TV and live events. Trust me.
Yep.
But yeah, so that'll do it for what's cool. Anything else?
That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
That's a lot. There's a lot of cool stuff out right now. It turns out.
That's 6 things that we found that were cool.
Yeah.
Man, and we're not one of them. Nope, never have been. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for joining us, Zef, and thank you all for listening. Remember, you can get the show notes for this episode by visiting nobudgetfilmmaking.com. episode 16. Already 16. That's just shocking.
That is shocking.
We got probably at least 4 more in us before we just bomb out.
And we're almost to 2,000 streams.
Ooh, all right, let's keep it up,
bad.
guys. Keep it up.
And don't forget to hop on over to iTunes and subscribe to our podcast. While you're there, give us a 5-star rating. If you haven't already, we appreciate those very much.
Please, we haven't got one yet. Please.
Yeah.
And if you have any filmmaking questions, ask away in the comments section, and we will try to answer them to the best of our knowledge.
Also, like our Facebook page. We just did our very first Facebook Live. We're going to be doing a few more on the Facebook page, so give us a like, and you can check out our Facebook Live sessions, ask us some questions.
You can see us.
Do the whole thing. Yeah.
Oh, man.
man.
Sweaty and fat.
Sweaty for sure.
Oh, yeah.
It's like 1 billion degrees in our studio right now.
Yeah, I like how you just glaze over the fat part, but I know what I am, so.
Well, hey. I don't have to tell them that again. Told them enough.
Yeah, all right, guys. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll check you next time.
Peace.